Panic choked Cynthia as the lawyer's cruel words echoed in her mind. 24 hours. That was all she had to find a husband, or she would lose everything her late mother had built to a greedy, vindictive uncle, collapsing against the damp brick wall of the upscale restaurant where she worked. The fat, exhausted waitress finally broke down, sobbing, burying her face in her hands. She never expected the heavy, polished shoes of her terrifying, untouchable employer, Deacon Anderson, to stop in front of her. "I'll do it," he rumbled. The clatter of silverware against fine china and the low, intoxicating hum of wealthy patrons filled the dining room of L'Ostan, an exclusive, high-end establishment nestled in the heart of Chicago. Cynthia Jenkins balanced a heavy silver tray laden with champagne flutes and caviar on one hand, navigating the tight spaces between the velvet-lined booze. She was a big woman, unabashedly fat, with wide hips, a soft, prominent belly, and thick thighs that chafed beneath the heavy fabric of her uniform skirt. Her apron strings were tied tightly, accentuating her dramatic curves. And while she often caught the smears of the snobbish, stick-thin socialites she served, she held her head high. She had to. This job paid the bills, and more importantly, it kept the ruthless debt collectors hired by her uncle at bay. Cynthia reached table 4, offering a warm, professional smile that didn't quite reach her tired, brown eyes. She served the drinks with practiced grace, ignoring the way a wealthy businessman scoffed as her hip accidentally brushed against the back of his chair. She murmured a quiet apology, her cheeks flushing, and quickly retreated to the kitchen. The kitchen was a chaotic symphony of shouting chefs and sizzling pans, but it was safer than the dining room. It was there, wiping down her tray, that the maître, a sharp-featured man named Simon, tapped her shoulder. "Jenkins, someone is here to see you." "Office now." Cynthia's stomach plummeted. Visitors during a shift at L'Osteria were strictly forbidden unless it was an emergency. She untied her apron, smoothing down her black blouse over her generous chest, and walked down the narrow, dimly lit hallway toward the back offices. Sitting in the small visitors' room was Richard Belmont, a slick corporate lawyer who worked exclusively for her uncle, Gregory Harrison. Gregory was a vicious, calculating man who had resented Cynthia's mother for leaving the family estate, a sprawling, multi-million-dollar property on the outskirts of the city, solely to Cynthia. "Mr. Belmont," Cynthia said, her voice trembling slightly as she squeezed her large frame into the small chair opposite him. "What are you doing here?" "My shift ends at midnight." Belmont didn't offer a polite greeting. Instead, he slid a thick manila envelope across the table. "I'm here because time is up, Miss Jenkins. Tomorrow is your 25th birthday." "I know when my birthday is," Cynthia replied defensively, crossing her plump arms over her chest. Then you should also be intimately aware of the stipulation in your late grandfather's trust, which governs the transfer of the Harrison estate. Your mother managed to bypass it through a loophole, but upon her death, the original terms snapped back into place. You must be married by your 25th birthday to claim the deed and the trust fund. If you are not legally bound in matrimony by midnight tomorrow, the entire estate defaults to the next male heir. Belmont smiled, a thin reptilian stretching of his lips. That would be your Uncle Gregory. Cynthia felt the air leave her lungs. That's ancient history. My lawyer told me we had months to fight that clause in probate court. Your lawyer was severely outmatched, Belmont said smoothly, standing up and adjusting his expensive silk tie. The judge ruled this morning. The clause is ironclad. Gregory is already moving his things into the foyer. He told me to give you a message. Pack up the few boxes of your mother's sentimental junk, or it goes in the incinerator by morning. Unless, of course, you manage to find a groom in the next 24 hours. Belmont let out a dry, mocking chuckle, his eyes raking over Cynthia's heavy, curved figure with blatant disgust. But let's be realistic, Miss Jenkins. Miracles are in short supply. He left the room, leaving the door wide open. Cynthia sat frozen. The estate wasn't just a house. It was the only piece of her mother she had left. It contained generations of memories. Her mother's art studio, her childhood, the thought of Gregory, a man who had verbally abused them for years and tried to sabotage her mother's business, living there, destroying her mother's legacy, was a knife to the heart. Panic, thick and suffocating, rose in her throat. She couldn't breathe. She stumbled out of the office, pushing past the swinging doors of the kitchen, and burst out into the cool, damp air of the back alley. The city rain had just stopped, leaving the pavement slick and reflecting the neon lights of the street. Cynthia collapsed against the rough brick wall. Her knees gave out, and she sank onto a wooden delivery crate. The tears came then, hot, heavy, and uncontrollable. She gripped her soft stomach, curling into herself as the sobs racked her heavy frame. She was 24, working 60 hours a week, and completely alone. She hadn't been on a date in 2 years. Men in her city either fetishized her size in secret or treated her like she was invisible in public. Who was going to marry the fat, exhausted waitress in 24 hours? I'm going to lose it all, she choked out into the empty alleyway. Mum, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You are crying over a piece of paper, Cynthia. The voice was deep, resonant, and coated in a thick, rough gravel that demanded immediate obedience. Cynthia gasped, her head snapping up. Stepping out from the shadows of the doorway, illuminated only by the faint glow of a street lamp, was Deacon Anderson. Deacon Anderson was a myth whispered about in the locker rooms and kitchens of Chicago's elite restaurants. He owned L'Osteria Nara, along with half the real estate in the commercial district. But everyone knew his wealth wasn't born from hospitality. It was born from blood, loyalty, and violence. He was the head of the Anderson Syndicate, a ruthless mafia boss whose name struck fear into the hearts of hardened criminals and corrupt politicians alike. He was a terrifyingly handsome man, tall and broad-shouldered, draped in a bespoke charcoal Italian suit that probably cost more than Cynthia made in a year. His dark hair was swept back, and his piercing dark eyes locked onto her with a predator's focus. Cynthia instantly scrambled to stand up, hastily wiping her tear-streaked face. She was intensely aware of how she must look. Her hair frizzy from the kitchen humidity, her face red and blotchy, her large body taking up space in a way she had always been taught to apologize for. "Mr. Anderson," she stammered, her voice shaking. I'm sorry. I was just taking a break. I'll get right back inside." "Stay where you are," Deacon commanded. It wasn't a request. He stepped closer, the scent of expensive bergamot cologne, dark tobacco, and rain washing over her. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. He had always been a ghost in the restaurant, appearing only to conduct hushed meetings in the VIP room, flanked by his massive enforcer, Larkin Steves. But Cynthia had always felt his eyes on her. Whenever she dropped a tray, whenever she laughed with the line cooks, she would glance up and see Deacon watching her from the balcony, his gaze heavy and assessing. She had assumed he was waiting for a reason to fire her. "I heard the lawyer," Deacon said, his voice dropping to a low murmur as he stopped inches from her. "Gregory Harrison is your uncle." Cynthia swallowed hard, nodding. "Yes, sir." "A rat," Deacon stated flatly. "He owes my associates a significant amount of money. Money he plans to pay back by selling off your mother's estate once he secures the deed tomorrow." Cynthia's eyes widened in horror. "He's going to sell it." "No, he can't. That house is everything." The tears started a rash, threatening to spill over her lashes. "But there's nothing I can do. I need a husband by midnight tomorrow, or the estate goes to him. And she gestured to herself, a self-deprecating laugh escaping her lips. "Let's just say there isn't a line of suitors waiting around the block to marry the chubby girl who smells like garlic and cheap soap." Deacon's jaw clenched, a muscle feathering in his cheek. He reached out, and to Cynthia's utter shock, his large, calloused hand gently cupped her jaw. His thumb brushed away a stray tear. The touch was electric, sending a jolt of heat straight down her spine. "Never insult yourself in my presence again," he growled softly, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her breath hitch. "You have no idea what men see when they look at you, Cynthia." Before she could process the compliment, if it even was one, Deacon dropped his hand and took a step back, all business once more. "You need a husband," Deacon stated. "I need a wife." Cynthia stared at him, sure the exhaustion was finally making her hallucinate. "Excuse me, the Anderson family operates on tradition. The elders of the commission have been breathing down my neck for 2 years. A boss without a wife is viewed as unstable, a liability. They are threatening to shift power to a rival faction if I do not anchor myself with a family. I have no time for courtship, and I have no desire to marry one of the spoiled, treacherous daughters of my associates." Deacon adjusted his cuffs, his gaze locking with hers. "I want someone loyal, someone outside the life, someone I can trust." "And you trust me," Cynthia whispered. "I have watched you work in my restaurant for 3 years, Cynthia. You are diligent. You take the abuse of my worst customers with grace. You protect the younger waitresses, and you have never once complained." He stepped into her space again. "Marry me. We sign a contract. I give you my name, my protection, and I guarantee that Gregory Harrison never sets foot on your property again. You keep your estate. I keep my seat at the head of the table." Cynthia's heart hammered furiously against her ribs. Marry a mafia boss? It was insane. It was a death wish. But the image of her uncle laughing as he tore down her mother's rose gardens flashed in her mind. "What? What does being your wife entail?" she asked, her voice barely a squeak. "I'm not exactly trophy wife material, Mr. Anderson. I don't fit into sample sizes, and I don't know how to host mobster dinner parties." Deacon let out a low, dark chuckle that vibrated in his chest. "I don't want a sample-sized trophy, Cynthia. I want you. As for the rest, you will be safe. You will be provided for. You will move into my penthouse. We will present a united front to the public and to my enemies. And intimately." The question slipped out before she could stop it. Her face flushed a deep, violent crimson. Deacon's eyes darkened, dropping briefly to her full breasts before snapping back to her eyes. "That will be entirely up to you. I do not force myself on women. But make no mistake, Mabella. You will wear my ring, and the world will know you belong to me." 24 hours. She had less than 24 hours to save her mother's legacy. Cynthia took a deep breath, squaring her round shoulders, drawing herself up to her full height. "Okay, I'll do it." Deacon didn't smile, but a fierce gleam of satisfaction shone in his eyes. He pulled a sleek black phone from his pocket and hit a speed dial. "Larkin, bring the car around to the alley. We are going to a jeweler." He hung up and looked at her. "Take off the apron, Cynthia. You don't work here anymore." Within 10 minutes, Cynthia was sitting in the back of a bulletproof Maybach, the leather seats softer than her mattress at home. The massive enforcer, Larkin Steves, drove in absolute silence. Deacon sat beside her, radiating heat and power. They arrived at an exclusive private jeweler that had opened its doors strictly at Deacon's command, despite the late hour. The jeweler, a nervous, sweating man, brought out velvet trays of enormous, blinding diamonds. Cynthia felt entirely out of place in her cheap black slacks and scuffed shoes. "Mr. Anderson, these are too much," she whispered, eyeing a ring that looked heavy enough to sink a ship. "Just a simple band is fine." "Deacon," he corrected her, his voice low. "And a simple band will not suffice. The elders must believe I am utterly captivated by you. The ring must reflect my obsession, his obsession." The words sent a shiver through her fat body. Deacon bypassed her hesitation, reaching out to pick up a breathtaking 4-carat emerald-cut diamond flanked by flawless baguettes set in platinum. He took Cynthia's left hand. His large, warm fingers swallowed hers as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Beautiful," Deacon murmured, though his eyes were on her face, not the diamond. "It suits you." Cynthia stared at the rock on her hand. Her life had just violently derailed. And yet, sitting beside the most dangerous man in Chicago, she felt an odd, terrifying sense of safety. The following afternoon, hours before the midnight deadline, the rain from the previous night had cleared, leaving the city skies a bruised, vibrant purple. There was no grand church, no walking down an aisle lined with flowers. Deacon had arranged the ceremony at a private, heavily fortified estate belonging to the Anderson family, situated deep in the woods of the North Shore. Cynthia stood in front of a floor-to-length antique mirror in the guest bedroom, staring at her reflection. She wore a dress Deacon had procured for her in a matter of hours. It was a deep, rich ivory silk that draped flawlessly over her generous curves. It had long lace sleeves, a plunging neckline that accentuated her cleavage, and a corseted waist that highlighted the dramatic flare of her hips. For the first time in her life, she didn't just feel pretty, she looked powerful. She looked like a boss's wife. A sharp knock at the door startled her. The door clicked open, and Deacon stepped inside. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo that fit him with lethal perfection, a black silk tie resting at his throat. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw her. For a long, agonizing moment, the room was silent. Deacon's eyes traced the line of her neck, the swell of her breasts pushed up by the silk down to the flare of her wide hips. The heavy, dark hunger in his gaze made Cynthia's knees weak. "You look," Deacon started, his voice rougher than usual. He cleared his throat, stepping forward. "You look magnificent, Cynthia." "Thank you," she breathed, her heart doing a frantic dance. "I'm terrified." "Don't be," he said, offering his arm. "I will handle everything. You just have to say I do, and sign the papers. Your lawyer..." has already filed the preliminary injunction. Gregory Harrison was served an hour ago. He has been locked out of the estate. A wave of profound relief washed over her, so strong it brought fresh tears to her eyes. "You did that already?" "Nobody takes what belongs to my wife," Deacon stated simply. He led her downstairs to the estate's grand library. A private judge, sweating profusely under the intense glare of Larkin Steeves, and several other heavily armed, suited men stood waiting by the fireplace. The ceremony was painfully quick, stripped of romance, but heavy with the weight of consequence. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Deacon turned to Cynthia. "May I?" he asked quietly. Cynthia nodded, her breath catching. Deacon's hands spanned her thick waist, pulling her flush against his solid chest. He leaned down, his lips brushing hers in a gentle, firm kiss that tasted of mint and danger. It was meant for show, but as his grip tightened on her waist, pulling her hips against his, the kiss deepened into something possessive and searing, sending a wave of heat pooling in her belly. When he finally pulled away, Cynthia was dizzy. The judge quickly packed his briefcase, desperate to leave the Mafia compound. "Congratulations, Mrs. Anderson Larkin," Steeves grunted from the corner, pouring 2 glasses of scotch. Before Cynthia could take a glass, a sharp, deafening crack shattered the glass of the library's massive French doors. Chaos erupted in a split second. "Get down," Deacon roared. He tackled Cynthia to the Persian rug, his massive body covering her completely, as a hail of bullets tore through the room, shredding the antique books and splintering the mahogany furniture. Cynthia screamed, pressing her hands over her ears as the deafening roar of gunfire filled the enclosed space. She could feel the heavy, thundering beat of Deacon's heart against her back. He was a solid shield of muscle and bone over her soft, trembling body. "Larkin, suppressing fire," Deacon yelled, pulling a sleek, dark handgun from the holster beneath his tuxedo jacket. "It's the Lombardi family, boss. They must have tracked the judge," Larkin shouted back, returning fire through the shattered windows with a submachine gun he had seemingly pulled out of thin air. "Stay perfectly still, Cynthia," Deacon commanded, his voice eerily calm, despite the violence exploding around them. He rolled off her, crouching low, and began firing precise, lethal shots out into the garden. Cynthia lay flat onto the floor, her beautiful ivory dress covered in glass shards and wood splinters. She squeezed her eyes shut, sobbing in pure terror. This was the reality of the bargain she had struck. She had traded her cruel uncle for a world where death came crashing through the windows. Suddenly, a heavy thud shook the floorboards near the terrace. Deacon let out a sharp curse. "They're breaching the side door. Larkin, hold this line. I'm getting her to the safe room." Deacon grabbed Cynthia's arm, hauling her up with staggering strength. "Run," he ordered. Cynthia didn't need to be told twice. Despite her size and the heavy silk of her dress, adrenaline fueled her legs. She ran alongside Deacon, her hand clutched tightly in his as they sprinted down the hallway. Behind them, the sounds of shouting and gunfire echoed through the luxurious house. They reached a dead end in a portrait gallery. Deacon slammed his hand against a hidden panel behind a painting, and the wall slid open, revealing a reinforced steel door. He punched in a code, shoving Cynthia inside the dark concrete bunker before following her in and locking the heavy door behind them. The silence inside the safe room was absolute, a jarring contrast to the war zone outside. Emergency lights flickered on, casting a dim red glow. Cynthia collapsed against the cold concrete wall, gasping for air, clutching her chest. Oh my God! Oh my God! Deacon holstered his weapon, his chest heaving slightly. He stepped toward her, his face a mask of cold fury. He reached out, his hands frantically checking her arms, her torso patting down her thick waist to ensure she wasn't hit. "Are you hurt? Did the glass cut you?" he demanded. "No, I'm okay," Cynthia hyperventilated, sliding down the wall until she sat on the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. Who were they? Why are they shooting at us? The Lombardi's rivals? Deacon spat, pacing the small room like a caged panther. They found out about the marriage. They know that by marrying you, I solidify my position with the commission. They wanted to sever the bond before it could be filed. He stopped pacing, turning to look at her, a dark, terrifying realization dawning in his eyes. "Deacon," Cynthia whispered, shrinking back from the look on his face. "The Lombardis don't have the intelligence network to track a private judge on 2 hours' notice," Deacon said softly, dangerously. "Someone tipped them off. Someone who had a vested interest in ensuring you didn't survive to claim your estate." Cynthia's blood ran cold. "Uncle Gregory." Deacon nodded slowly. "Your uncle isn't just a rat, Cynthia. He's in bed with my enemies. He tried to have you killed today." A wave of nausea washed over her. Her own family had just tried to murder her. The reality of her situation came crashing down, suffocating and heavy. She was trapped in a concrete bunker, in a ruined dress, married to a mobster with a hit on her head. "I'm sorry," she choked out, burying her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. I brought this to your door." Deacon knelt down in front of her. He didn't offer empty platitudes. Instead, he reached out, his strong hands grasping her wrists, pulling her hands away from her face. "Listen to me," Deacon said, his voice a low, lethal promise. "You are Cynthia Anderson now. You are my wife, and nobody, not the Lombardis, and certainly not Gregory Harrison, will ever touch a single hair on your head. I am going to tear down their entire organization. I am going to drag your uncle into the street and I will make him beg for your forgiveness before I end him." Cynthia looked into his dark, ruthless eyes, and for the first time in her life, she saw someone who was willing to burn the world down to keep her safe. The fear slowly ebbed, replaced by a strange, fierce spark of loyalty to this dangerous man. The battle lines were drawn, and the 24 hours were up. Cynthia had her husband, but the war for her life had just begun. They remained in the dim red glow of the safe room for what felt like hours, though Deacon's heavy gold watch indicated it had only been 45 minutes. Cynthia sat on a plush cot in the corner, her ruined wedding dress pulled around her, shivering despite the ambient heat of the bunker. Deacon stood by the reinforced door, a stoic sentinel, listening to the faint, muffled crackle of his earpiece. Finally, a heavy, rhythmic knock echoed against the steel. 3 rapid taps, a pause, then 2 more. Deacon's tense shoulders dropped a fraction. He punched a code into the keypad, and the heavy door hissed open. Larkin Steeves stood in the hallway, wiping a streak of blood from his cheek with a pristine white handkerchief. The grand estate behind him smelled sharply of gunpowder and pulverized drywall. "House is clear, boss," Larkin grunted. 4 Lombardis dead on the terrace. 2 more apprehended alive by the perimeter guards. "We have a cleanup crew en route, but this location is compromised. Have the prisoners taken to the warehouse on the docks? I want to know exactly how Gregory Harrison fed them our location," Deacon ordered, his voice cold and devoid of mercy. He turned to Cynthia, his expression softening only slightly as he crossed the room and offered her his hand. "Come, Mabella. We are leaving." Cynthia took his hand, letting him pull her up. Her legs felt like lead, her mind still struggling to process that she had just survived a Mafia hit on her wedding day. Deacon wrapped his suit jacket around her trembling shoulders, shielding her from the chilling reality of the bullet-riddled hallway as he guided her out to a waiting armored SUV. The drive into the heart of Chicago was a blur of neon lights and rain's slicked streets. They pulled into the secure underground garage of a sleek glass high-rise downtown. Deacons bypassed the main lobby, escorting her onto a private elevator that required a retinal scan to operate. The doors opened directly into a sprawling, multi-million-dollar penthouse that overlooked the glittering city skyline. It was a fortress in the sky, cold, immaculate, and undeniably masculine. Dark hardwood floors, charcoal furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a dizzying view of the world below. "Larkin will post guards at every entrance to this building." "You are safe here," Deacon said, shrugging off his shoulder holster and placing it on a marble console table. He turned to her, his dark eyes sweeping over her disheveled state. "There is a master suite down the hall. The bathroom is stocked. Take a hot shower, Cynthia. Wash the fear off." Cynthia nodded numbly, clutching his oversized jacket around her thick frame. She found the bathroom, a massive expanse of black marble and gold fixtures, with a shower big enough for 4 people. She stripped off the ruined silk dress, letting it fall to the floor in a sad heap. Catching sight of herself in the massive vanity mirror, she winced. Her belly was soft and rounded, her thighs thick, her breasts heavy. Next to a man like Deacon, a man carved from granite and power, she felt entirely inadequate. Why would a man who could have a runway model want a fat waitress who brought a target onto his back? She stood under the scalding water until her skin turned pink, washing away the smell of smoke and fear. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a plush white towel that barely stretched around her wide hips, she found a pair of men's black silk pajamas folded neatly on the bed. They were huge on her, the pants pooling at her feet, but the silk felt incredible against her skin. Walking tentatively into the main living area, she found Deacon standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He had shed his tuxedo jacket and tie. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the dark hair on his chest. "I ordered food," he said, without turning around. "You need to eat." "I'm not really hungry," she lied. Her stomach was churning, but mostly with anxiety. Deacon turned, his gaze raking over her in his oversized pajamas. The dark, hungry look returned to his eyes, making her breath hitch. He walked over to the kitchen island, where several steaming cartons of rich garlics, scented pasta, and roasted meats sat waiting. "Sit," he commanded gently, pulling out a stool for her. "You have had a shock. Your blood sugar is low." Cynthia obeyed, perching on the edge of the stool. She picked up a fork and twirled some of the linguine, taking a small bite. It was incredible, rivaling anything they served at L'Osteria. "Deacon," she began hesitantly, looking down at her bowl. "I don't understand. You could have left me in that alley. You could have married someone else. Someone who looks like she belongs in this penthouse." Deacon set his glass down with a sharp clack. He rounded the island, stepping between her parted knees, trapping her against the counter. Cynthia gasped softly as his hands settled on her wee soft hips, his thumbs brushing the silk of the pajama pants. "Do you know what is wrong with the women who belong in this world?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "They are starved. Starved of loyalty, starved of food, starved of anything real. They are fragile, painted porcelain dolls waiting to shatter. I do not want fragile Cynthia." His hands slid up her thick waist, his palms warm and heavy, resting just beneath her heavy breasts. Cynthia's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "You," he murmured, leaning in until his lips brushed her ear, "are substantial. You are soft and fierce and real. Every curve, every inch of you drives me absolutely mad." Cynthia squeezed her eyes shut, a tear escaping. People look at me, and they just see the fat girl. Let them, Deacon growled, kissing away the tear on her cheek. I am the only man who gets to see you. I am the only man who gets to touch you. You are my wife, my queen, and I will burn the city to ashes before I let you doubt your worth again. He captured her lips in a deep, bruising kiss. There was no hesitation, no holding back. It was a kiss of utter possession and raw desire. Cynthia melted against him, her plump arms wrapping around his broad, muscular neck. She had never been kissed like this, like she was something precious, something intoxicating. When he finally pulled away, they were both breathless. He rested his forehead against hers. Eat your pasta, Mrs. Anderson, he whispered. Tomorrow we take back what belongs to you. 3 days passed in the gilded cage of the penthouse. For Cynthia, it was a surreal existence. She was showered with luxury. Racks of custom-tailored designer clothes delivered to the door, a private chef sending up meals, and Deacon's fierce, unwavering attention whenever he was home. He spent his nights with her, treating her heavy, soft body with a reverence and passion that left her constantly flushed and reeling. But during the day, the penthouse was a command center. Deacon's men came and went in sharp suits, their faces grim. The war with the Lombardi family had escalated rapidly into the streets of Chicago. Retaliatory hits were whispered about on the evening news, chalked up to gang violence by a bribed police force. On the 4th morning, Cynthia sat in the sunlit dining area, dressed in a sweeping black cashmere wrap dress that hugged her curves flawlessly. She watched Deacon as he stood by the window, speaking rapidly in Italian into his encrypted phone. When he hung up, his jaw was set in a hard, brutal line. They cracked one of the prisoners, Deacon announced, walking over to pour himself a black coffee. Gregory Harrison didn't just sell out our location. He promised the Lombardis a 10% cut of the estate sale if they eliminated you before the marriage could be registered with the state. Cynthia gripped her coffee mug, her knuckles turning white. Is he still at the house? No, he knows he failed. He knows I am coming for him, Deacon replied, his eyes dark. He is cowering like a rat in a Lombardi-controlled warehouse on the south side. He thinks he is safe surrounded by their guns. Can we just take the estate back now? Cynthia asked, her voice trembling slightly. The deadline passed. We are married. The lawyer filed the papers. It's legally mine. It is yours, Deacon confirmed. But claiming the physical property while Gregory is still breathing and allied with the Lombardis leaves you vulnerable. I will not have you looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. He set his mug down. We are going to draw him out. How? By hitting him where his greed blinds him, Deacon said, a ruthless smile playing on his lips. He wants the estate because he believes there is a hidden wall safe in your mother's art studio, containing bearer bonds, wealth your grandfather kept off the books. Is it true?" Cynthia blinked, surprised. "Yes, but my mother emptied it years ago to pay for my college and the hospital bills before she died." "It's empty." "Gregory doesn't know that," Deacon said. "And the Lombardis are greedy. If they think Gregory is going to hold out on a massive payout, they will fracture. We are going to leak a rumor through the docks. We will let it be known that my men are tearing the estate apart today to find the bonds to fund our war against them." Cynthia understood immediately. "He'll panic. He'll think you're taking his money." "Exactly. And he will force the Lombardis to move on the estate to protect his imaginary payout," Deacon finished. "We will be waiting for them." "I want to be there," Cynthia said suddenly. The words shocked even her, but a fierce, protective anger was bubbling up inside her chest. Her mother had worked herself into an early grave to protect that house. Deacon's expression instantly darkened into a scowl. "Absolutely not. It will be a bloodbath, Cynthia. You will remain here under heavily armed guard." "Deacon, please," she pleaded, standing up. The cashmere dress swished around her thick calves. She walked over to him, placing her soft hands flat against his rigid chest. "That house is my legacy. He terrorized my mother in those halls. He insulted me my entire life. I don't want to hide in a tower while you fight my battles. I am your wife. Let me stand by you." Deacon stared down at her, his jaw clenching so hard she could hear his teeth grind. The protective, dominant mafia boss warred violently with the man who deeply respected the fire in his new wife. He looked at her wide, defiant eyes, the determined set of her soft jaw. "You will not leave the armored transport," he finally growled, his hands coming up to grip her thick waist possessively. "You will be surrounded by 4 of my best men, including Larkin. If a single bullet comes within 100 yards of you, I will drag you back here myself. Understood?" "Understood," Cynthia breathed, relief flooding her. By nightfall, the trap was set. A convoy of black, unmarked SUVs rolled out of the city, heading toward the sprawling Harrison estate on the city's outskirts. The sky was overcast, swallowing the moonlight and casting the massive Gothic-style mansion in deep, menacing shadows. Cynthia sat in the back of the lead SUV, her heart hammering against her ribs. Lark and Steves sat in the driver's seat, an assault rifle resting easily across his massive thighs. Deacon sat beside her, checking the magazine of his sidearm with terrifying practiced efficiency. He wore tactical gear over his dark clothes, a stark contrast to the tailored suits she was used to. "They are already here," Deacon murmured, looking out the tinted window at the wrought iron gates which had been forced open. Several unfamiliar dark sedans were parked haphazardly on the front lawn. Gregory got greedy. Larkin grunted, couldn't wait for his Lombardi escorts to secure the perimeter. Deacon turned to Cynthia, his eyes burning with a fierce, deadly light. He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing over her soft skin. "Stay in the car, Mabella. I am going to take out the trash." Without another word, Deacon opened the door and stepped out into the night, signaling his men. Like a wave of shadows, the Anderson syndicate descended upon the Harrison estate. Cynthia rolled down the tinted window just an inch, her breath catching as the first sounds of shouting echoed across the manicured lawn. The trap had snapped shut. The silence of the Harrison estate shattered in a symphony of violence. From the safety of the armored SUV, Cynthia watched as the manicured front lawn of her childhood home transformed into a lethal battlefield. The staccato pop, pop, pop of suppressed gunfire cut through the humid night air, followed by the blinding yellow-white flashes of muzzle fire illuminating the ancient oak trees. Deacon moved like a phantom in the dark. He was a predator entirely in his element, fluid and merciless, systematically dropping the Lombardi soldiers who had foolishly parked their sedans in the open driveway. Beside her, in the driver's seat, Lark and Steves monitored a police scanner that had been illegally tapped into the Cook County dispatch frequencies, ensuring the local authorities were conveniently turning a blind eye to the sector. They're flanking the east wing. Larkin growled, his eyes narrowing as he peered through the reinforced windshield. A sudden burst of automatic fire kicked up the dirt near the marble fountain, pinning down 2 of Deacon's men. Larkin cursed, unbuckling his seatbelt and racking the bolt of his assault rifle. He turned to Cynthia, his massive scarred feel entirely serious. "Mrs. Anderson, I need to provide covering fire for the boss. I am locking the doors from the outside. Do not, under any circumstances, unlock them or roll that window down any further. The glass is rated for armor-piercing rounds. You are safe in this box." "Okay," Cynthia breathed, her wide chest heaving under the black cashmere of her dress. She pulled her thick legs up onto the seat, curling into a protective ball as the adrenaline roared in her ears. Larkin slipped out of the vehicle, the heavy door slamming shut behind him with a solid, echoing thud. The electronic locks engaged with a sharp beep. Cynthia was alone. She pressed her face near the one-in gap she had left at the top of her window. Desperate to keep her eyes on Deacon, she watched him move from the cover of a stone pillar, his sidearm barking twice, sending a Lombardi enforcer crashing into her mother's prized rose bushes. The brutality of it made her stomach churn, but there was a dark, twisted pride blooming in her chest. This terrifying king of the underworld was fighting a war on her front lawn solely to protect her. But as the main firefight shifted toward the grand entrance of the mansion, drawing the attention of Deacon and Larkin, a shadow detached itself from the side hedges. Cynthia's breath hitched. A figure was sprinting in a panicked, hunched gait away from the house, heading directly toward the rear of the convoy. As the man crossed a patch of moonlight, Cynthia recognized the slicked-back gray hair and the ruined bespoke suit. It was Gregory Harrison. Her uncle was abandoning the Lombardis, fleeing like a coward, while the men he hired died for his greed. He looked frantic, clutching a heavy silver revolver in his shaking hand and hauling a leather duffel bag over his shoulder. He scrambled toward the shadows of the tree Ein, but abruptly stopped when his crazed eyes landed on the idling, sleek Maybach SUV at the back of the pack. He recognized the vehicle. Everyone in Chicago's underworld knew the Anderson family's armored transport. Cynthia froze as Gregory's head snapped toward the tinted windows. Even in the darkness, she could see the feral, desperate realization contorting his face. If Deacon Anderson was here, then the new bride was likely sitting right inside that truck. Gregory dropped the duffel bag and lunged toward the SUV. Cynthia scrambled backward across the soft leather seats, her heart hammering violently against her ribs, her heavy thighs tangled in the skirt of her dress as she hit the opposite door. Gregory slammed his hands against the glass, his eyes wild and bloodshot. "Cynthia, I know you're in there. You fat, ungrateful, open the door." When she didn't move, he raised the silver revolver and fired point blank at the window. The gunshot was deafening, but the armored glass held, leaving only a spiderweb fracture of white cracks. Gregory screamed in frustration, striking the glass with the butt of the gun. Then his eyes caught the one-in gap at the top of the window where Cynthia had been getting fresh air. With a guttural snarl, Gregory shoved the barrel of the gun into the narrow crack, twisting it downward to aim into the cabin. "Unlock the door, or I start blindly firing into the back seat," he shrieked, spit flying from his lips. "I know how big you are, Cynthia. I won't miss." Panic, cold and sharp, pierced her chest. She was trapped. But as she looked at the gun barrel, and then at the pathetic, sweating face of the man who had tormented her and her mother for years, the fear suddenly evaporated. In its place rose a blinding, suffocating rage. She was done apologizing for her size. She was done cowering. She was Anderson now. Instead of reaching for the door lock, Cynthia threw her heavy body forward. She slammed her palm onto the power window control on the door panel, pulling the switch up with all her might. The heavy armored glass surged upward with hydraulic force. Gregory shrieked in agony as the window violently clamped down on his wrist, pinning his arm against the steel frame of the door. The gun fired wildly into the floorboards of the SUV, the bullet safely embedding itself in the reinforced chassis before slipping from his crushed fingers and dropping onto the leather seat. Cynthia didn't let go of the switch. She held it up, the motor whining as it ground into bone and cartilage. "Let me go," Gregory wailed, sinking to his knees outside the car, his arm trapped above his head. "Cynthia, please. I'm your family. You stopped being my family The day my mother died, Cynthia yelled back through the glass, her voice shaking but fierce. Suddenly, a massive dark figure materialized behind Gregory. Deacon Anderson grabbed Gregory by the back of his collar and the belt of his trousers, lifting the older man completely off his feet. Deacon's face was a mask of terrifying, demonic wrath, splattered with a few drops of blood. "Lower the window, Cynthia," Deacon commanded, his voice a lethal, vibrating bass that cut through the night. Cynthia immediately let go of the switch and lowered the glass. Gregory slumped to the grass, sobbing and clutching his mangled wrist. Deacon didn't hesitate. He kicked Gregory squarely in the ribs, sending the man sprawling onto his back, gasping for air. Deacon stood over him, pulling his sidearm and aiming it directly at Gregory's forehead. The firefight around them had ceased. The remaining Lombardi men were either dead or kneeling in the grass, with Larkin and the syndicate enforcers standing over them. The estate was eerily quiet, save for Gregory's pathetic whimpering. "Please," Gregory begged, tears streaming down his wrinkled face as he looked up at the towering Mafia boss. "Anderson, please, I'll give you everything. I have J.P. Morgan bearer bonds in the bag. Millions. It's all yours. Just let me live." Deacon didn't look at the bag. His dark eyes flicked to the passenger window, meeting Cynthia's gaze. "My wife already owns everything on this property, Harrison. You have nothing to bargain with. I was just trying to scare her," Gregory lied, coughing up blood. "I wouldn't have hurt her. She's my niece." "You called her a bitch," Deacon said softly. The calmness in his voice was infinitely more terrifying than a shout. "You insulted her body. You ordered a hit on her on our wedding day. You have breathed your last breath on my wife's property." Deacon shifted his stance, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Wait," Cynthia said. She opened the heavy door and stepped out of the SUV. The cool night air hit her flushed skin. She stood tall, her thick, curvy frame casting a long shadow on the grass. She walked over to stand beside Deacon, looking down at the broken man on the ground. Gregory looked up at her, hope flashing in his eyes. "Cynthia, tell him we're blood. Have mercy." Cynthia stared at him, feeling absolutely nothing for the man trembling at her feet. She remembered the nights her mother cried over his cruelty. She remembered the threat of being thrown out onto the streets. "You burned my mother's rose bushes," she noted quietly, gesturing to the trampled, bloody garden behind him. She turned to her husband. "Do it." Deacon's eyes flared with dark, obsessive pride. He didn't hesitate. A single muffled shot rang out, and Gregory Harrison collapsed onto the manicured lawn. Lifeless, Deacon holstered his weapon and turned to Cynthia. Without a word, he wrapped his massive arms around her waist, burying his face in the crook of her neck, breathing in the scent of her skin over the sharp tang of gunpowder. "My beautiful, ruthless queen," he murmured against her collarbone. The cleanup was swift and professional. By the time the sun began to peek over the horizon, painting the Chicago skyline in hues of bruised purple and gold, the Harrison estate showed no signs of the battle that had raged just hours before. The bodies were gone. The blood was washed from the marble steps, and Larkin's men were stationed at every perimeter gate. Cynthia stood in the center of her mother's art studio on the second floor. The room smelled of old oil paint, lavender, and dust. The morning light streamed through the skylight, illuminating the empty open-wall safe that Gregory had been so desperate to find. Deacon stood in the doorway, watching her. He had shed his tactical gear, wearing just a black undershirt that stretched tightly across his muscular chest and dark trousers. He looked exhausted, yet utterly invincible. "It's just as you said," Deacon noted, stepping into the room. "Empty." "He died for a ghost," Cynthia said softly, running her plump fingers over the edge of her mother's wooden easel. All that greed, all that violence. For nothing. Not for nothing. Deacon corrected her, crossing the room to stand behind her. He wrapped his arms around her thick waist, pulling her heavy, soft back flush against his hard chest. He rested his chin on the top of her head. "He died because he threatened what is mine. The Lombardis are broken. Their boss surrendered the South Side territories to me an hour ago in exchange for his life. The war is over, Cynthia." Cynthia leaned back into his embrace, closing her eyes. The sheer magnitude of the last 4 days washed over her. She had gone from a terrified, overworked waitress on the brink of homelessness to the most powerful woman in the city. "I have the estate back," she whispered, turning around in his arms to look up into his dark, penetrating eyes. "I saved my mother's legacy." "Technically, the contract is fulfilled, Deacon. The arrangement is complete." Deacon's grip on her waist tightened to the point of a bruise, a sudden fierce panic flashing in his eyes. "Do not speak of contracts, Cynthia. Do not think for a second that you are leaving me." "I'm not," she said quickly, reaching up to cup his rough, stubbled jaw. "I'm not going anywhere. But I need to know now that the elders are satisfied. Now that the war is won, do you still want me? The real me? Because this," she gestured down to her wide hips, her prominent stomach, her thick thighs, "isn't going to change. I am fat. I will always be fat. I don't fit into the glamorous world of a mafia boss." Deacon let out a low, rough groan. He backed her up against the edge of a sturdy oak work, pressing his hips intimately against hers. "You still don't understand," he breathed, his eyes burning with an all-consuming devotion that made her heart stutter. "I do not want glamour. I do not want skin and bones. I want you. I want the woman who stood tall against a gun barrel tonight. I want the woman whose body feels like heaven in my hands." He reached down, grabbing the hem of her black cashmere dress and pulling it up. His large, calloused hands sliding up her bare, thick thighs, making her gasp. His thumbs traced the soft curves of her hips, gripping her flesh with a desperate, reverent hunger. "You are not a contract, Cynthia. You are my obsession," Deacon vowed, his lips hovering an inch from hers. "You are the queen of my syndicate. I will worship this body. I will protect this house, and I will spend the rest of my miserable, violent life making sure you never doubt your beauty again." Cynthia's eyes filled with happy tears. The insecurities that had chained her for a lifetime finally snapped, falling away into the dust of the old studio. She wrapped her plump arms around his neck, pulling him down into a searing, desperate kiss that tasted of promises and forever. The 24-hour ultimatum had been designed to ruin her life. Instead, it had given her a kingdom, a home, and a terrifying, beautiful monster who loved every heavy, perfect curve of her body. If you loved this intense, pulse-pounding mafia romance, don't forget to smash that like button. Share this video with your fellow romance readers who love a fierce, curvy heroine and a dangerously obsessed mafia boss who will burn the world down for her. Want more gripping, dramatic stories filled with dark twists, passionate romance, and satisfying revenge? Hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Drop a comment below and let me know your favorite moment from Cynthia and Deacon's explosive love.